My name is Ava Mitchell. I'm 26 years old, and last week my family tried to force me to sign away 8 houses that legally belong to me. I was standing in my parents' dining room when Brandon raised a glass, smirking like he'd already won. My mother wouldn't meet my eyes. My father tapped the table, impatient, like my existence was an inconvenience. My hands were steady. My voice was calm. They thought I would break the way I always did. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from, and hit like, and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by your own family. Trust me, this story gets darker, sharper, and way more complicated than anyone in that dining room expected. You're going to want to hear every word. I grew up in a house where silence had a shape. It pressed against the walls, slipped under doors, settled on my shoulders like dust no one bothered to wipe away. Brandon was the son in our family, loud, bright, blinding, and the rest of us orbited him whether we wanted to or not. Especially me. I remember one of his birthdays. He must have been 10. I was 8. The whole living room smelled like frosting and wrapping paper. Balloons scraped the ceiling. My mother kept humming while arranging candles on a cake so tall it leaned. When she finally lit them, the flames danced across Brandon's face like he was some kind of golden boy prince. I stood beside him holding a paper plate. She didn't even look at me when she said, "Ava, move over, you're blocking the camera." That night, I ate a corner of cake with no frosting. I didn't know it then, but moments like that would carve deeper than I imagined. The opposite happened on my own birthday 2 months later. There was no cake, no candles, just a store-bought muffin placed on a chipped plate because my mother forgot the time. She gave me a side hug, quick and distracted, whispering, "Honey, you're so easy. You don't need all that fuss." Some kids grow up craving attention. I grew up learning not to expect any. School wasn't much different. Teachers adored Brandon. He had this loud laugh that made adults melt, and whenever they mixed up our names, which they always did, they only corrected themselves after he laughed first. I was the quiet kid who finished worksheets early and kept my hands folded neatly. One spring, I won a regional essay contest. My teacher took a photo for the bulletin board. Brandon got 3rd place in a soccer tournament the same week. My parents rushed to the field, snapping dozens of pictures of him holding a tiny plastic trophy. They never asked to see my essay. At dinner, Dad clinked his spoon against his glass and said, "We're proud of you, son." I swallowed a spoonful of cold peas and told myself pride was overrated. When I was 16, I asked for advanced math tutoring. Mom sighed dramatically, flipping through bills. "Sweetheart, money's tight right now." 2 days later, a brand new set of sports gear arrived for Brandon, helmet, pads, cleats. Everything top of the line. I carried the box inside for him. He didn't even say thanks. He just muttered, "Don't drop it." I didn't know it then, but that moment would matter later too. Still, there was one place where I never felt small: my grandmother Eleanor's house in St. Pete. It smelled like sea breeze and old books like safety. She had a tiny porch with a creaky screen door, and she always kept a jar of lemon cookies just for me. She looked at me like she actually saw me, not the shadow of someone else. The summer I turned 20, something happened at my grandmother's house that I didn't fully understand until years later. It was late afternoon, the kind where the heat sticks to your skin and the air feels heavy with secrets. I was helping her sort old papers in her study. The room smelled like lemon oil and dusty envelopes, sunlight cutting across the desk in sharp lines. She slid a small manila envelope toward me. "Ava," she said softly, "if you ever feel invisible, open this." Her eyes were steady, too steady, as if she was memorizing my face. I didn't open it then. I tucked it into my backpack, not realizing it was the first draft of the living trust, the one naming me as her successor. I didn't know it then, but she was already preparing for the storm she knew was coming. Back home, nothing had changed. Brandon was still the center of every conversation. At Thanksgiving that year, relatives filled our house with laughter and cigarette smoke. Kids were running around the football game, blasted from the TV, and the smell of turkey clung to everything. I helped in the kitchen for hours, peeling potatoes, setting the table, cleaning pans, while Brandon strolled in wearing a new leather jacket, bragging about some business opportunity he never explained. Mom gasped like he'd returned from war. "Oh, Brandon, look at you." She didn't say a word to me. I swallowed it. But it cut deeper than I expected. There were moments when the favoritism was almost absurd, like the Christmas morning when Brandon unwrapped a brand new laptop, silver, sleek, expensive. I unwrapped a thin sweater, 2 sizes too big, still smelling like the clearance rack. Dad clapped Brandon on the shoulder. "You'll need this for the future son." I remember pulling the sleeves over my hands, forcing a smile. I didn't know it then, but resentment has a way of fermenting quietly. After high school, I worked 2 part-time jobs while studying. I sent money home when Dad claimed the mortgage was tight. Later, I found out Brandon used part of it for a weekend trip with his friends. When I confronted Dad gently, he waved me off. "He's stressed, Ava. Let him breathe." My throat burned, but no words came out. Silence was easier. Or maybe I'd just been trained into it. The day I left for Atlanta at 22 was the first time I ever felt the world actually open. I packed my old car until the back seat looked like a thrift store exploded inside. The driveway shimmered in the heat. Brandon didn't come outside to say goodbye. He was sleeping off a late night. Mom hugged me close, but whispered, "Don't forget where you came from." Dad didn't hug me at all. As I drove away, my grandmother's envelope slid off the passenger seat and landed by my feet. I didn't pick it up. Not yet. I wasn't ready for what it meant. I didn't know it then, but everything inside that envelope would rewrite my entire future. Atlanta became my refuge, but even refuges have cracks. My apartment was small, just 1 bedroom overlooking a noisy street, but it felt like mine. For the first time, I could hear my own thoughts without Brandon's voice drowning them out. Still, my family always found a way to seep back in. It started with little things. A text from Mom. "Don't forget to call your brother. He's going through a tough time." No explanation. No hello. Just an order disguised as concern. I stared at my phone, feeling that familiar tightening in my chest. I didn't respond. Weeks later, Dad left a voicemail, sharp-clipped. "Ava, you hardly visit. Your mother worries. Brandon can't handle everything alone. Handle what he never handled anything." I deleted the message, but his tone stayed lodged under my skin like a splinter. Then came the rumor. Maya, my closest friend at work, walked over to my desk one morning with a strange look. "So, apparently you left home because you were jealous of your brother." I blinked. "What?" She shrugged. "Your cousin posted something on Instagram, commented that you're in a way because Brandon's the successful one." A bitter laugh escaped me. Brandon successful. In what universe? I didn't know it then, but that rumor would spread farther than I expected. Around that time, I went back to Clearwater briefly for my grandmother's funeral. The house was full of grief, but there was a sharpness underneath it, like everyone was waiting for something. A relative, Mr. Jacobs, who once helped with her property management, pulled me aside. There was something she wanted to finalize, he muttered, voice low, something about who she trusted. Before I could ask, Mom called him from across the room and he walked off. The comment stuck with me like a riddle I couldn't solve. After the funeral, the texts from my family got more intense. "Dad, Brandon's been handling the rentals. You need to stay out of it. Mom, don't stir things up. We're trying to keep the peace." Brandon, of course, had the nerve to send Try, acting like part of the family for once. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, but I didn't reply. Silence had become my armor. One night, exhausted after a long day, I finally opened the old manila envelope my grandmother had given me years ago. Inside was a preliminary version of the living trust, my name typed neatly beside words like successor and executor. My heart thudded so loud I could hear it in my ears. She had chosen me, not Brandon, not the golden boy, me. And she'd known exactly what it would cause. That discovery should have strengthened me, but instead, it dragged me deeper into the storm. The next day, Dad called and demanded I come to Florida. "No more delays," he snapped. "Your brother needs clarity. You need to sign a waiver. Don't make a scene." My stomach dropped. A waiver. That was the first time I realized Brandon wasn't just aiming for control, he was trying to erase me entirely. I didn't know it yet, but the real battle was about to begin. I drove back to Florida a week later, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. The heat pressed against the windows like a warning. By the time I arrived at my parents' house, the sky was bruised purple, and the front porch light flickered like it didn't want to stay awake for this conversation either. Inside, everything smelled like lemon cleaner and tension. Dad sat at the head of the dining table, clicking a pen with aggressive authority. Mom hovered behind him, smoothing imaginary wrinkles out of a napkin. Brandon was sprawled across a chair, legs kicked out, tapping his foot like he owned the place. The moment I walked in, he smirked. "Look who finally showed up." Dad slid a stack of papers toward me. "Ava, this is a simple waiver so your brother can manage the houses without complications." I didn't sit. "What complications?" he exhaled, sharply, annoyed that I dared to question anything. "You're in Atlanta. He's here. It's logical. Sign it." Mom tried to soften the blow. "Honey, it's just paperwork. Don't make this difficult." Her voice was honeyed, but her eyes were cold. Brandon leaned forward. "Come on, Ava. Don't drag this out. No lawyers, no drama. Let's keep it clean." That word clean set something off inside me. I picked up the paper with 2 fingers. 8 property addresses were listed. No explanation. No discussion. Just a line for my signature. They expected the version of me who stayed quiet, who swallowed everything, who always took the smaller plate, the quieter birthday, the forgotten acknowledgement. I laid the waiver back on the table. "No." The room froze. Even the ceiling fan seemed to stall mid-turn. Dad's voice dropped to a warning. "Ava." Mom's eyes shimmered with manipulated hurt. Brandon scoffed. "You're being childish." I didn't answer. Didn't defend. I grabbed my keys and walked out. As the door slammed behind me, I heard Mom whisper, "She always ruins everything." The sentence dug into me like a hook, but instead of pulling me backward, it pushed me forward. Back in Atlanta, the pressure only grew. Group texts lit up my phone day and night. "Mom, please stop acting out. Dad, you're making this hard on everyone. Brandon, grow up." I muted the thread and focused on the documents I'd brought from my grandmother's house. I reviewed tenants' payments, maintenance records, expense logs. Discrepancies jumped at me. Brandon had been siphoning money just like I suspected. The pattern was clear. He wasn't just mismanaging the properties. He was stealing from them. One evening, as I sorted receipts on my dining table, the buzzer rang. It was Mr. Reynolds, my elderly neighbor. "You look tired, kid," he said. "I'm fine," I lied. He studied me. "Your hands are shaking." I hadn't noticed. He handed me a small paper bag. "Warm food helps when your world's falling apart." After he left, I stared at the papers spread across my table. My grandmother hadn't chosen me by accident. She'd seen something in me, something my family never cared to notice. And for the first time in my life, I felt the ground shift beneath me. Not fear, not doubt. Resolve. The night of the celebration felt unreal from the moment I turned onto my parents' street. Cars lined the curb like a parade for a man who had done nothing but take. Laughter spilled from the open windows, warm and loud, the kind that could almost fool you into thinking this was a happy family. Almost. I parked across the street, killed the engine, and sat still for a moment. My watch, the silver one my grandmother gave me, glinted under the streetlight. I touched it once, steadying myself, then stepped out. Inside, the house buzzed like a hive. Relatives packed the living room, drinks in hand, faces red from wine and excitement. Brandon stood in the center, wearing that arrogant half-smile he'd perfected since childhood. He tapped his glass with a spoon. "Everyone," he announced, "thank you for being here. Tonight marks a new chapter. Dad and Mom have entrusted me with all 8 of our rental houses. His voice faded beneath the roll of my suitcase wheels. The sound sliced through the room, steady, metallic, impossible to ignore. Conversations died mid-sentence. Heads turned. My mother's smile froze. My father straightened slowly like he suddenly remembered I existed. I walked to the center table, set the suitcase upright, and unlatched it. Click, click, the room leaned in. I lifted the lid and pulled out the first deed, then the second, then the third. 8 total, each stamped, signed, and sealed. Gasps rippled around me. I spoke clearly, each word sharp as glass. "These are the recorded deeds. My grandmother transferred every property into a living trust 2 years ago. I placed the thick trust binder on top. And I'm the legal successor." Brandon pushed through the crowd, eyes wide. "No, no, this is fake." His voice cracked, the first real crack I'd ever heard from him. Before he could snatch anything, Mr. Caldwell stepped forward, adjusting his glasses. "I've reviewed these documents myself," he said. "Everything here is legitimate." Eleanor signed them in my office. I notarized the originals. Silence crashed over the room. Then a smaller voice spoke from the hallway. I was there too. Noah stepped out, hands trembling but eyes steady. I drove her to the notary. She asked me not to tell anyone until the right time came. Mom staggered back like he'd hit her. Dad's face drained of color. Brandon grabbed a deed and flipped through it desperately as if a different ending might appear between the pages. This can't be real. Dad, say something. Dad opened his mouth, but nothing came out. For once, his authority was useless. That was when Caldwell placed the final blow. There's also a financial audit attached. Records of funds Brandon withdrew from the properties over the last 18 months. Eleanor added them to the trust file 3 days before she passed. A stunned cousin whispered, "Oh my God." Brandon's breath came fast, uneven. "You set me up!" He growled at me. I met his eyes, my voice low, cold. "No, you set yourself up. I just kept the receipts." The room erupted, whispers, gasps, the sound of someone knocking over a glass, and I just stood there, calm, in the center of the chaos. Then I closed the suitcase, slow and deliberate, and the click echoed like a final verdict. I didn't need to say anything else. The truth was loud enough. I left before anyone could ask me to stay, before the shouting turned into bargaining, before my parents decided which version of the truth felt safest to believe. The moment I stepped outside, the night air hit me thick, humid, heavy with the smell of cut grass and spilled wine drifting from the open windows. I walked to my car with my suitcase rolling behind me, the wheels humming like a quiet victory song. When I closed the trunk, I finally looked back at the house. People were still moving behind the curtains, frantic silhouettes swirling in confusion. For once, none of them were looking for me. The drive out of Clearwater was almost silent. The road stretched ahead long and dark, broken only by the glow of gas stations and late-night diners. My grandmother's watch rested against my wrist, the metal cool and grounding. I touched it and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Permission. By the time I reached the state line, my phone had exploded with messages, missed calls, frantic texts, guilt-laced voicemails. I didn't listen to a single one of them. I slid the phone into the glove compartment and shut it. Back in Atlanta, dawn was just beginning to rise, brushing the sky with pale pink and soft gold. My apartment felt different when I walked in, calmer, cleaner, as if the air itself knew something had shifted. I placed the fireproof folder on the top shelf of my closet. Then I added the USB drive, the one with my grandmother's voice on it. I hadn't played it yet. Not fully. Just enough to know there was more on it than a simple statement. More instructions. More secrets. More power. They thought they were taking everything from me, I whispered into the quiet room. But they handed me the one weapon I needed. And the best part? They still had no idea what else I had planned. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, hit subscribe. If you've ever been told to stay quiet or to take less or to disappear so someone else could shine, this space is for you. My story isn't finished. Not even close. There are still things in that folder I haven't shared. Voices I haven't played. Truths they're not ready to face. So, stick around. Because sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one holding all the evidence.